So the Path of Exile 2 Early Access has been released and people have been loving it. You might be looking at its success and wondering if the game is something you should try. Is it overly complicated, demanding more time than what you can give it to learn all of its mechanics? Or is Path of Exile 2 accessible and enjoyable to new players as well? Now at the time of this recording, I've put in about 10 to 12 hours into the early access. So for a game like this, I understand that 10 to 12 hours is nothing, but from a beginner's perspective, this is more than enough time to decide whether or not this game is for you. Let's be honest, you are not going to be putting in more than 12 hours to push through a lot of pain or friction points or continue to try to learn a game that is just really inaccessible to new players. However, after that 10 to 12 hours, I'm very happy to report that this game is beginner friendly to those who are not only new to Path of Exile, but also new to the ARPG genre itself. For a quick background on myself, I do classify myself as a beginner. My experience with ARPGs is minimal. I loved Lost Ark at its release and they made a bunch of changes that turned me off completely. I tried Path of Exile 1 and I lasted about 1 to 2 hours because it just didn't grab me. I found it to be too overwhelming and it felt super dated. I then got into Diablo 4 after seeing how much fun D2 and D3 looked. I played D4 for about 30 to 40 hours and just stopped. I ran out of things to do, it felt watered down and was missing so many features at launch that were included in its previous games. It felt like an unfinished game and the missing content was probably going to be sold to me later on down the line, which kind of felt predatory to me, so I stopped. But let's get into why Path of Exile 2 is different and why you should be playing it even if you are a beginner. So we'll start with the systems. Systems play a big role in games like this, and it's one of the main factors that put off new players. One of the major issues I had when I first tried PoE 1 years ago was just how overwhelming it was for new players. Diablo 4 was really good in this aspect as it was a lot more user friendly, but at the same token only offered a fraction of things to do. I am incredibly happy to report that Path of Exile 2 has struck a very fine balance of giving players a stupidly large amount of systems and mechanics to toy with that advocate for truly unique customization, while also doing it in a way that new players can still understand what the fuck is going on. One of the biggest pain points for Path of Exile 1 is that infamous skill tree. It's huge, it's intimidating, and it put a lot of people off. Path of Exile 2 also has a large skill tree, however it's a lot more passive. It's a lot more on the rails, so paths open up, and while you can divert and take your own path, it's incredibly clear where you can go or should go for newbies. The tree is also just a lot clearer in how it's organized because it's really separated by each class. Everything at the start of the tree is kind of on one track with minimal delineations, so it really takes out the room for error, which is great for beginners. This is a perfect opportunity for new players to really learn and become familiar with the systems before it branches out and really starts opening up. And if you really do feel like you made a mistake in investing in the wrong thing, you can always just respec your tree and put the points into wherever you want. It really allows you to customize your character in any way that you want at any time in the game. Every system and interface in this game is quite easy to understand as well. Don't get it wrong, there is a lot to take in here and a lot to absorb in the game, and it can get fairly complicated. But be safe in the knowledge that this game does an exceptional job at walking you through everything. It clearly labels everything and puts things where you'd logically expect them to be. And of course by now, there'd be a bunch of tutorials and build guides on YouTube to help you even further. If you are new to this genre of gaming, you also might not be familiar with the mapping on the keyboards, so to make you feel more comfortable, you do have the option of using a controller. Not really surprising given that this also releases on consoles, but the game feels fantastic on controllers. And as also to be expected, once you use the controller, the icons will change to reflect what you're using. So you're not stuck with glyphs for, let's say, an Xbox controller, trying to remember the layout of that when you're using a PlayStation controller, for example. Now, regardless of whether you're using mouse, keyboard, or controller, the game feels super tight. Combat is really responsive, dodging feels great, and again, lots of customization options for you to take advantage of to give you the best chance in any situation. Now there's also a bunch of quality of life additions made in this game to make navigating the menus so much easier. One such example is this. Your map is growing by the minute as you play, and you gain multiple quests at one time. This game gives you the options to see your active quests when you're looking at the map and shows you exactly what waypoint you need to travel to continue on whatever quest you like. For new players who might get intimidated by massive maps and trying to navigate between different areas, this is a super useful feature. Another example is how close the vendors are to one another. Most vendors that you need are within a few steps from each other in the main town, so you're never having to go around and look for someone who's on the other side of the town. Path of Exile 2 just has everyone mere steps away from each other, and it's such a welcome change. So as you can see, the systems here are set up to give you the most enjoyable experience, but let's move on to those classes. Path of Exile 2 starts its early access with 6 available classes and will have 12 at its full release or launch, unless something changes from now until then. I have mained the sorceress for now, and it's been an absolute ton of fun. Looking into the other classes, everyone looks to play extremely differently, and this is only further exacerbated by your equipment, weapons, and builds. This shows that there is a true purpose to each class and something to cater toward everyone's preferred playstyles. So if you are new to this game, you'll be able to find something that best suits you. So we have good systems and a variety of classes, but what's the point of playing a game if the content within it is just rubbish? The content in this game is phenomenal. There is so much to do, so many interesting story threads, side missions, opportunities to explore, chances to customize your character in any way that you want, varied enemy encounters, ever-evolving landscapes and terrains, and really satisfying boss encounters. Everything in this game spells out an experience that is going to be unique to you. Someone may pick the same class as you, but you can be rest assured that they won't have the same skills, items, cosmetics, or tree upgrades as you. The more you play, the more your character becomes tailored and specific to you. It really feels like you're in control of so much in this game, and it feels great when you mow down a room full of enemies. The feeling of being incredibly strong and knowing you are behind that is so satisfying. Now you will come into many difficult areas, but if they do prove to be a bit too much for you, you can always go away, level up, find some better items and gear, and come back and try again. Now just on that point of the game's difficulty, I can see this being a decent pain point for some, and probably would be the one thing to push new players away. There isn't really a difficulty option in this game. There is a hardcore mode, but everyone usually starts out on the normal difficulty. So everyone is dropped in on that same level. The difference in how much you struggle on this level really comes down to how much or little you grind, how much focus you're putting into your skills, your items, and weapons, among other things. This isn't a game where you can just jump in and start button mashing. It's a lot more difficult than that. But that also means it's much more satisfying when you overcome those challenges. You will need to pay attention, especially at the start, because even incredibly basic mobs can take you out with ease. I was pretty proud of the fact that I was mixing my firewall with ranged lightning and frost attacks to increase the damage outputs. And this footage is only from like my 4th or 5th hour in. So when the game allows me to do this at 4 to 5 hours in, I can only imagine what I'll be doing at say hours 30, 50 and beyond. Now Path of Exile 2 is going to be free to play at its full launch. You can pay $30 to $40 now to get in at early access, or you can just wait for the full release and never spend a single dollar on the game that offers so much. If you do decide to spend the money to get into early access now, you then get that same amount of money back in in-game currency to spend on your character. And that's what I did, and I bought myself this fucking sweet ass armor set. So while it is used to gain access, it's also given back to you in another form, and it's such a smart way of doing things and really shows how much Grinding Gear Games respects its player base by not adopting predatory monetization practices. Moving into the performance, despite there being an apology issued before the game had even released regarding expected queues and overpopulated servers, I actually experienced very minimal wait times to get in. In that 10 to 12 hours time, I experienced 0 dropouts, 0 disconnects, 0 lag, and after the first few hours of launch, there was not even a single queue to jump into this game. This has got to be one of the best launches in gaming history, and it's actually amazing for a game that is in such high demand. Now I did wait a few hours after launch before I really tried to get in, as I expected hundreds of thousands of people would attempt to log in at the very first minute. I too was one of those people, but I had no luck. But I went off and did a few other things and came back 4 to 5 hours later to try to log in, and I was able to get in without any issues. If you were holding back on buying this game thinking that there'd be some kind of server issues, I can assure you that there are none now, so feel free to jump in. Now there's nothing worse than playing a game and finding out that the community sucks. So how is the community here? So far in my experience, most people I've come across have been super welcoming and helpful to us new players. Anytime I had a question, I was promptly answered and there was never any belittling or someone telling me that this game isn't for me or any negativity. It was always just a warm message providing concise information or tips, and every encounter I've had so far has just been pleasant. The world you're playing in Path of Exile 2 is also just fantastic. Locations are so varied, they're highly detailed, and every nook and cranny feels so well thought out. I've never had a time where I've been stuck on a wall or a layout didn't make sense, and going to new locations was always so exciting because the terrain changes obviously, but you're also introduced to new and interesting enemy types that constantly evolve how you approach certain areas. The world is also full of optional quests and bosses, so you'll never run out of things to do. So once again, is Path of Exile 2 beginner friendly? In every facet, Path of Exile 2 has pulled down the walls that made the franchise historically inaccessible, and it welcomes back old Path of Exile players, ARPG fans, and newbies all the same. It's simple enough to get your head around, but complex enough that it will keep your attention. How deep you go into its system really is up to you, and that is a huge benefit to this game. It caters to such a wide and broad stroke of players that everyone can enjoy this. This feels like a genre-defining game. It's only in its early access, but the amount of content and things to do here far exceeds anything else in the genre. With more classes, cosmetics, missions, bosses, and other things to do on the way, all while being a free-to-play game at its launch, Path of Exile 2 has really solidified its spot as top dog. If you are someone new to the franchise or genre, be safe in the knowledge that you will enjoy your time with Path of Exile 2. Although it's complex, it's clear to understand its many systems, and the community behind the game is incredibly welcoming. I can't recommend this game highly enough to you. It's now just up to you. Do you wait for its launch, or do you spend the money to get in now? Let me know what you end up doing.